I would like to call to order the Malibu City Council special meeting of April 25, 2018. May I have a roll call?
Councilmember Lamont?
Here.
Councilmember Peak?
Here.
Councilmember Rosenthal? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Wagner?
Here.
Mayor Mullen?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Lloyd Ahern, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
May I have an approval of the agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a report on the posting of the agenda?
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on April 20th, 2018.
And I was supposed to say any opposed, hearing none, it is so ordered. Are there any public comments? Do I have any council member reports? Okay.
Sorry, one thing I would just add, it's kind of unrelated to our meeting tonight, but I know that the school district is holding a couple community meetings, one this evening. Obviously, we're not allowed to attend, and tomorrow for the community in Point Doom School. I believe it starts at 6 p.m. So tomorrow night or tonight, if you're out there and you don't want to listen to us, you can go to they're having a community meeting up in the Point Doom area.
Very good. Thank you very much. And we're on to item 1A, proposed budget for fiscal year 2018-19. Lisa, may I have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Mayor Mullen and council members. I'm happy to be here tonight to present the first iteration of our proposed budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. And before I do that, I want to make sure that I thank the staff who was really instrumental in helping us get this out, and that includes Ruth Pieman, Elizabeth Shavelson, the rest of the finance team, Renee Neerman, Joni Hand, Pamela Romani, and all of the department heads who really did a lot of work in helping pull all of it together. So with that, let's get into the budget. Okay, so we'll start with revenues. The city's budget is based on the expected revenue for the upcoming year. In fiscal year 2018-2019, the city anticipates receiving $45.9 million of revenue, including $31 million of general fund revenue. And if we want to look at a breakdown of those general fund revenues, you can see that property tax accounts for 39% of the general fund. Malibu's other major tax revenue sources are sales tax, utility users tax, and transient occupancy tax, which together make up another 31%. Licenses and permits and service charges are the next two largest sources of revenue, both at 10% and 9% respectively. A review of the general fund revenue over the past 10 years demonstrates the city's financial growth and stability. The city began to see significant growth in fiscal year 2012-2013, with general fund revenue increasing from $21.6 million in fiscal year 2011-2012 to $25 million in fiscal year 2013-2014, and then to $30.6 million last year. Riva and I are both fairly conservative in budgeting and forecasting, especially at this point in the budget process. So you'll see that the revenue is projected to remain steady for this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And I would expect that as we move forward throughout the next couple months in the budget process, that those numbers will change and we will adjust them accordingly. . Assessed property value information is provided to the city from the Los Angeles County Assessor's Office and shows an assessed value of almost $15.8 billion. What is significant about this is that the majority of Malibu's property is residential. Cities with comparably assessed values typically are much bigger and have many large industrial or commercial centers. The growth in secured property tax follows the same trend line as the city's overall general fund revenue, as well as the growth in the city's assessed property value. 10 years ago, the city received $6.7 million in property taxes, and today that revenue source is approaching $10 million. The city's second largest tax revenue source is sales tax, which has experienced a growth over the past few years. The city's major sales tax contributors are typically restaurants. The projected budget includes almost $3.8 million of sales tax revenue. You'll notice a slight dip in the current year revenues due to the refunding of a misallocated revenue from a restaurant that was actually outside the city limits. And just to let you know, we have had a longstanding agreement with HDL companies who monitor the city's sales tax revenues and equally find taxes that haven't been properly allocated and make sure that the city receives that revenue, but they're also there to catch mistakes if something was incorrectly attributed to us. I feel like we missed a slide. Well, there was a slide, it seems to be gone, on utility taxes, and that revenue is fairly constant, so it's pretty much a straight line, and that annual revenues hovers around $2.4 million annually. Okay, so tax from hotels, motels, and the short-term rentals of private homes has increased significantly over the past 10 years. This slide shows you the taxes from hotels and motels, which is now about $1.5 million. The projected amount for the coming fiscal year is $1.7 million, and that takes into account the relatively new Nobu Ryokan and Surfrider Beach Club hotels, which are really fully online now. And so we anticipate, based on their numbers, that this is the number we'll see in the coming year. The city currently has 217 properties registered as short-term rentals. When the city began collecting this revenue source in 2009, it generated $100,000. Last year, revenues exceeded $1.8 million. Airbnb began collecting tax on behalf of the city in 2015 and has over 200 properties registered with it. Airbnb has remitted approximately $1 million for the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year. These revenues are projected to remain steady through next fiscal year. The city's new agreement with host compliance will simplify the tax remittance process and should yield greater compliance among users. Here's the utility users tax revenue. So you can see pretty much a straight line. The proposed expenditure budget is based on the council's priorities and approved work plan. The work plan for 2018-2019 is attached at the end of the budget and details the city's priorities and which departments will work collaboratively to achieve them. So briefly, I'd like to review some of the highlights and accomplishments of the work plan from last year. The city adopted 2 ordinances on the council's highest priority list, the dark sky and formula retail ordinances. Malibu continues to be a leader in environmental issues. Environmental programs are well received in the community, and the city's ban of plastic straws and cutlery continues to receive international attention and has generated significant press coverage. Staff held numerous workshops and recycling events to engage both staff and the community in creative ways to be sustainable. The council priorities come from the desire to provide excellent service to the Malibu community. This service ranges from outstanding community programs like Chumash Days and the Concert on the Bluffs to major capital improvements that enhance safety for residents and visitors. As in past years, staff developed a coordinated summer traffic and safety plan with LA County Beaches and Harbors, California State Parks, Los Angeles County Sheriffs, and the CHP. The city convened a task force to formulate a strategic plan to address homelessness in Malibu. And to further enhance public safety, the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget includes a new line item for homeless services in the public safety budget. Additionally, in order to meet the needs of our residents, the city must engage the community. Several public town hall meetings were held on fires, incidents of mass violence, and earthquakes. Staff tested the city's emergency alert system to make sure that it functions optimally in the event of a disaster. And the city also launched a redesigned website to improve access to information. So as we get into the numbers, I can say that the city, again, has a balanced general fund budget for fiscal year 2018-2019, which means that the ongoing operating expenses do not exceed the annual general fund revenue for the year. Total expenditures are projected to be $46.4 million. The general fund expenditure budget is $30.3 million and is consistent with the projected general fund revenue amount of $31 million. This slide shows $31.7 million in general fund expenses because it also includes some one-time capital projects that are being funded with general fund dollars. Other major expenses include $10 million of special revenue expenses. Legacy Park Project Fund expenses are budgeted at $2.3 million. A new expenditure fund in this year's budget is the Civic Center Wastewater Treatment Facility's operating budget, which is projected to be $1.8 million. And that is an estimate based on the assessment engineer's understanding of what it would take to operate the plant on an annual basis, and we will, of course, adjust that budget accordingly as we get real numbers in when the plant is online. And all expenses for operating the facility will be reimbursed through assessments to the properties that are in Phase 1. If we look at a breakdown of total expenditures, that it shows that 39% of the expenditure budget will go to operating and maintenance, 23% to personnel, 20% to capital projects, and 18% to public safety. In last year's budget, capital projects were at 43% of the total due to the Civic Center Wastewater Treatment Facility construction, which is now 95% complete, so that number has dropped way down for the coming fiscal year. So looking at this breakdown just for the general fund, it shows that operating and maintenance expenses are at 39%, personnel is at 31%, public safety is at 26%, and capital projects are at 4%. And just to highlight a couple of the changes in this year's budget, the proposed budget includes increases of $169,000 for landscape maintenance expenses, and this increase is due to the council's direction to eliminate pesticide use on city properties. And additionally, City Hall and Bluffs Park will have a new operating expense totaling approximately $35,000, which is for the sewer system fees for the new wastewater facility. Public safety remains one of the city's highest priorities. Law enforcement is a major part of that public safety mission. The city will spend $7.7 million on its contract with Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department next year, and that includes $640,000 for the beach team. This represents an increase of just over 3%. Compared to other neighboring contract cities, Malibu spends a significant amount of $591 per resident on this very important expense. I do want to mention here that all cities that have contracts with the LA County Sheriff participate in covering the cost for the Liability Trust Fund. In recent years, the costs for this fund have been increasing as a part of the settlements that the county has had to pay out. A number of city managers, including Riva, have been working really hard over the past couple years to curtail these costs and have had some good success. Additionally, I want to mention here, as we're talking about public safety, that the proposed budget includes a new public safety specialist position that's been added to the Public Safety Department, and much of the cost for that position will be covered by a grant from Los Angeles County through the COG for regional coordination on homelessness issues. The proposed budget includes $9.4 million for capital projects. Ongoing multi-year projects include the Street Overlay Project, improvements to PCH, and other Measure R projects. There are also clean water projects and improvements to city facilities, including electric vehicle charging stations and the solar carport structure at City Hall. The largest capital improvement project in the city continues to be the Civic Center wastewater treatment facility, and construction, as I mentioned, is approximately 95% complete. The projected completion date remains for Phase 1 to be September 2018, and we're anticipating spending $1.2 million this year. The city continues to plan for Phase 2 of the project and will convene more meetings with property owners in the next fiscal year. The proposed budget includes funding for 80 full-time employees, the equivalent of 13 employees working as part-time staff, and the equivalent of 4 employees working as student interns. All salary ranges, positions, and benefits are approved by council as part of the final budget. The Administration and Finance Subcommittee requested that staff analyze the budget implications of raising all part-time salaries to a minimum of $15 an hour. The proposed budget reflects the new city minimum wage of $13.25 per hour that goes into effect on July 1st, 2018. The cost to raise the salaries to $15 an hour would be an additional $97,000 for the coming year. So that's just to give you the information. We put in the $13.25, but if you're inclined to do something differently, that would be the amount. The ongoing costs of public employee pensions and retiree health benefits have been the topic of many recent news stories. Even though CALPERS contribution rates, which are now for the city at 17.15% for classic employees and 7.27% for new employees, have been increasing slightly, staff has worked towards lowering those costs. The proposed budget projects 56 classic employees, slightly up from last year, and this is due to assumptions that several of the vacant senior level positions will be filled by classic employees rather than new. Statewide, many municipalities are struggling with unfunded liabilities of their CALPERS pension programs. The city has worked hard to be aware of the trends and plan accordingly. And this is made slightly easier because the city does not have any public safety employees or unions, which limits the liabilities. Additionally, the city has always had a fairly conservative PERS contribution plan. Bartell Associates recently completed an actuarial analysis of the city's CalPERS pension plans, which indicates that the city is able to maintain the current and projected PERS rates. Staff has been evaluating the possibility of making a lump sum payment that will lower future costs for the city. Staff will work towards including that in next year's budget. In addition to pension costs, the city will pay $183,000 next year to cover health insurance for its existing retirees. By requiring 5 years of employment before health benefits are vested, the city has again limited some of the future liability. The city has been putting money aside to cover these costs in the future. In the next year, the city will contribute $540,000 to these other post-employment benefits. Each year, the council awards funds to local nonprofit groups through the General Fund Grant Program. This year's budget includes $150,000 for grants. The grants will be discussed by the Administration and Finance Subcommittee starting at 9 o'clock on May 1st, and the subcommittee's recommendations will be included in the budget item on the May 29th council agenda. Last year, the General Fund Grant Program included $76,000 in funding for the People Concern outreach workers to aid homeless individuals in the city. As I mentioned earlier, in fiscal year 2018-2019, $200,000 has been included as a line item in the public safety budget for homeless services. And so we adjusted the amount available in this year's budget accordingly. We took that from the $216,000 that we awarded last year, we reduced it by the $76,000 that was for that homeless service. The proposed budget provides for a general fund undesignated reserve of 102% of the annual general fund operating budget. And I just want to take a moment to say that's pretty amazing. Hard work on Reva's part for many, many years, and the continued hard work that we've been doing has gotten us to this place. And not every city is as fortunate as Malibu is to have these kinds of reserves. Anecdotally, we were at a presentation by the Santa Rosa city manager who was talking about the fires that they had and the major disaster, and they had a mandate to only have a 15% reserve, and they were lucky enough to have saved 25% as reserved. And that was the only thing that got them through the aftermath of the fire and enabled them to continue to provide services and not have to let go of staff after they had that major disaster. And then I also want to note that this budget was prepared before last Monday's meeting, where the council approved the $42.5 million land acquisition. And the approval to use the general fund undesignated reserve as a part of the funding package. So the next version of the budget will reflect the land acquisition, including a change in the amount of the reserve. The proposed budget anticipates a starting general fund undesignated reserve of $31.4 million and an ending reserve amount of $31 million. The total of all funds at the end of the fiscal year will be $41.7 million, and a projected ending balance for next fiscal year will be $41.2 million. Again, the next version of the budget will reflect the land acquisition, and so these fund balance numbers will change. In addition to the undesignated reserves, the council has approved specific projects with set-aside funds that are tracked separately as designated reserves. Some are funded with general fund revenue, but others are funded with special revenue like gas taxes or highway funds. Legacy park revenue comes from the lease payments of the commercial tenants. And there was a decrease in this fund from the one-time payment for the wastewater treatment facility assessment, which will ultimately be reimbursed. The funds you see in the Civic Center wastewater treatment facility line are the prepaid assessments by the city and the County of Los Angeles. The city is holding these funds and they will be used for the construction. And looking ahead in our budget process, sort of the next key dates, next week, the Administration and Finance Subcommittee meeting will meet on May 1st, Tuesday, to review the general fund grants, and they will meet again on Thursday, May 3rd, to discuss the budget. The budget public hearing will be held on May 29th, which is a Tuesday, I will remind everyone, because Monday, May 28th is Memorial Day, and the final budget will be back for review on June 11th. And that completes my formal presentation, and I'm happy to entertain questions and start your discussion.
Let me open it up for discussion. Anybody have anything they would like to say?
How much of a line item do you have for the people concerned?
Well, we put $200,000 into that line item. I think we had an amount.
The amount that they've requested is approximately $180,000, so we added a little extra there in case there's other types of programs that might come up over the course of the year. And I could get you the page of that in one moment. That is available on page, sorry,
And that doesn't include the new staff position that will be working with homelessness in the public safety budget, correct?
Yeah, that's page 35, and that the staff position is in the salaries section, so that 200,000 is specifically for homeless services.
I see it, thank you.
it's under line item 5119, about the middle of the page.
Okay, anybody else have any comments? Go ahead, Laura.
Sorry, and I should ask this before, but when, Reva, when they're doing the liability trust fund, and I know we all pay for some of that, is that done by population? Is it done by the size of our budget? Oh boy, did I just open up a can of worms?
I'll try to make that explanation very short. The liability trust fund is something that was established through Los Angeles County on behalf of the cities that participate for sheriff services, and the costs are managed by the Joint Powers Insurance Agency, which manages the fund. And what happens is there's a list of open cases and a potential settlement or cost associated with that. And then so it's sort of they track what the potential amount could be and put that aside in a reserve. And then every year they do a report or an analysis to see which of those cases have settled or been taken off the list, and then the amount changes accordingly. What has happened is we've seen over the last, I'm going to say 10 years, this continual growth of the amount that is due or pending due for settlements. Last year was the first year that we saw that number go down. As you all know, I sit on the oversight board for that fund, and there are quite a few other city managers on that as well as other elected officials from each patrol division. And we're really pushing back on how the county and JPIA are managing those funds. There's a working group of city managers that's looking at doing things to invest the fund differently, to lower the amount of reserves, to lower the cost. There are actually cities who can't afford their existing sheriff budget, much less an additional 3% or whatever the account amount would be. So the short answer is we're really trying to curtail those costs, and in fact they had requested a mid-year increase, and we all said no. So.
And I appreciate that, and I know that Lou had worked on that and that you've worked on that, but my question was also, so let's say, so the 3% is, what's the 3% based on? Is it based on our sheriff budget? Do we base it on how many residents we have? So in other words,
Well, the 3% is a flat rate that goes across to every contract city. So it's not based on your sheriff budget amount or your per capita numbers. It's an amount that the liability trust fund expects to increase by. So knowing what is in the hopper of cases, they expect that there'll be that many more costs or to cover that, and everybody pays the same increase amount.
so even if you have 10 people in your city,
Correct.
as opposed to 10 million?
Correct.
That seems
Well,
a
everybody's
little
sheriff
unfair.
budget is different.
Right.
So
No, I know.
if you're looking at the city of, Lancaster, whose
Right.
sheriff budget is probably $20 million.
So they're paying 3%
They're paying
of that.
3% of $20 million.
Right.
And we have a sheriff budget of
Right.
$8 million, and we're paying 3%.
So it's
of
based
$8
on our
million.
budget. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Skylar.
All right, so I have a couple questions. I see that in terms of our projected expenditures, where are we at? I see electric vehicle chargers, and then I was curious about electric vehicles and solar. And I know that we had a brief conversation that we may have to move some of that stuff around or not. My hope is that we don't have to, and that any vehicles that we purchase are electric vehicles, and we get rid of all of our gas vehicles and buy electric vehicles, even if we buy used vehicles. And I don't know if we can do that this year, but we can definitely do it by 2020, hopefully. And that's what I would like you to explain to me.
So in the current iteration of the proposed budget, the electric vehicle charging stations remain as a capital improvement project. Likewise, the solar carport for City Hall has remained as an active project for the fiscal year. So those are on track to move forward. In addition, I believe we only put in one vehicle for the upcoming fiscal year to purchase, and the plan is to purchase an energy-efficient electric vehicle. And hopefully it ties with having an actual charging station.
And just this morning, Councilmember Peak, I got an email about a statewide grant program for energy-efficient vehicles, and Public Works staff is actively looking into whether we could get some grant funding to purchase electric vehicles. So that just happened earlier today.
Okay, and then I guess you explained the sort of CalPERS thing. So in terms of the rest of the council, at our budget meeting that we had, we talked about the livable wage for people that live in Malibu. And we discussed raising the minimum wage for anybody that's working for the city to $15. There was and we wanted a little bit of an explanation on that, which we heard tonight. I do not believe that it would be realistically to expect somebody to live in this city and work for a wage of that amount of money per hour, of $13. Or 15. But I would like to see it go to. I mean, yes, I agree with you there, but I think that 15 should be our baseline, and I think that we should go with that. And I'm just curious to hear what you guys say or what your opposition is.
Go ahead, Jefferson. You were faster on the trigger than I was.
So the total expense for the year would be 97 at 15 from 13.
To increase to 15, our projected expenditure for next fiscal year would be a total of $97,000.
And does this include that we already did some lifeguards at the high school? We already approved that one earlier.
Yes, the lifeguard wage in the current iteration of the budget is $14 per hour. And so that would increase to 15 if we're increasing across the board to 15, and that's included in the $97,000.
Thank you.
When is the state mandating that the minimum wage go up to $15?
Well, the city adopted its own minimum wage ordinance, which is in line with the state. And so on July 1st of this year, the minimum wage raises to $13.25 an hour. Next July 1st, 2019, the minimum wage raises to $14.25 an hour. And then the following year in 2020, on July 1st, the minimum wage becomes $15 an hour. So it's 2 years away.
So what you're saying is 15 now and then no raise until they get to whatever? Okay. So let me just comment on that. I think a minimum wage job is not necessarily something, you know, you're expected to buy a home with and live on, etc. I think there's the idea of having minimum wages too high can prevent, you know, jobs being available. That's not the case here because we're not eliminating jobs. So I would say, let's be clear if we're going to do that and we have to recognize that it is freaking expensive to live here, whether you're buying a house or not. In fact, I think it's probably almost impossible for a lot of people to buy houses here. But so what is the actual cost for this next year's budget so that we're all clear on that?
So the cost, as we've calculated it, would be an additional $97,000. I do want to point out that typically what we do every year is put a COLA on all wages based on the February Consumer Price Index. So typically what we would do is put a COLA on that $15. So it would increase next year unless you direct us to do differently. I'll also say that the $15, this minimum wage basically applies to part-time staff, not to, we don't have any permanent staff positions that are below $15 an hour. It's all part-time staff.
Comments?
Yeah, I think actually we led the state in minimum wage. And, you know, if we have $16 billion worth of tax base, I think we can afford to pay people $15 an hour. And I think the difference is with the COLA on the 97,000, that's less than $3,000. So, yeah, I definitely agree with Scott that we should do this.
It's 3.6 is the CPI as indicated.
3.6 is the CPI of this year. We don't know what it'll be next year, but 3.6 is a fairly high number. It's higher than we've seen in many years, and so it usually wouldn't, you know, I don't think it would be
Usually
exponentially
closer to like
different
2.5,
from that.
2.
Yes.
Indicating the cost of living going up significantly. Yep, or future inflation.
I just wanted to add that I also support this. I think that a lot of our part-time people are the ones interacting with our community through our community services department, Parks and Rec, all of that. And I think also not one of them is going to be able to live in Malibu, whether that was full-time or part-time, though many of them do because they might be, I know many, many years ago, my kids were referees for the basketball program when they were in high school. And so I also think the gas taxes have gone up. Hopefully that will not be revoked in November. But I just think that it costs, you know, everybody who works in Malibu, even if you live in Malibu, has to drive far. So I think that it's also a reflection, giving them some more money to offset some of the increase in the cost of having a car.
Lisa, and Reva, what's your feedback on that? Is it going to break the bank, or can we handle that?
I'm assuming we have consensus from the council to move forward with trying to incorporate $97,000 to raise the rate to $15, and we will do everything we can to do that and stay within a balanced budget.
I had one more question, unrelated item, was in terms of water usage at both Legacy and Bluffs Park. I know that, are we going to see a significant decrease in the cost associated with that because of the Civic Center wastewater treatment facility coming online?
That is our hope. We left, to be conservative again, we left those budget amounts similar to last year because we just don't know. But I would hope that we see a decrease as we start to be able to use recycled water from the treatment facility.
So I just wanted to be straight that as those things come online, in terms of because it's a monetary expense that goes out there, that we prioritize using as much of that water as we can in order to save and mitigate whatever those costs are. Is that we all?
Well, I think what will be interesting is that I know when it was planned, you know, it was planned for a certain amount, and now that we're buying some of the land there, the amount of water that they were planning for is going to be less. But yeah, I mean, that was always the plan, was to use that for the recycled waters for the properties that put in for that, right, Reva?
Our intent is absolutely to irrigate as much of city property with recycled water as possible. Again, because it's an unknown, we thought it was best to leave that line item as it is, and then in the mid-year, once we have some more data on how much water has actually been paid for versus what we're getting, then we could adjust it accordingly. So it's sort of a safety measure on our part.
So my other concern sort of related to this is, are we going to have any sort of capital expenditure associated with piping those parks for that kind of expense? And is that something that's substantial, or has that been addressed yet?
That was all done as part of the construction project and the assessment district, so everything is ready to go.
I'm not talking about the distribution of the lines up there. What I'm talking about is the distribution within the park.
I'm going to ask Rob to come up and explain that. My understanding is once we have water coming in from the treatment plant that's clean water, it will be able to go. So I'm going to let him engineer explain that.
So there'll be some minor costs to actually connect the reclaimed water to the irrigation system. So there'll be some, it'll be minor.
But we won't have to replumb like that whole park and run irrigation lines, purple pipe all over the place.
I don't think so. But that's what we're planning to do in the next couple of months, is just kind of try to figure all that stuff out. We have the contractors here. We have a budget and a line item for them to do that. So I'm not expecting that to be a huge expense, and hopefully the project will take care of most of it.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mayor, for right now. Oh, sorry, one more thing. In terms of the general fund, our general fund grants and that whole scenario, I would like to see a minimum of $100,000 go to the Boys and Girls Club within our city on an ongoing basis. And I don't know how if that's been calculated in there or not, or if that's it. I think just 25, I don't know exactly what the number is, but I would like to figure that into this budget, if I have consensus from council on that. My reason for that are the resources that facility provides to the youth in our community, and in particular their addition of the wellness services that unfortunately in some aspects of our nation have become something almost looked at as a public safety concern in terms of the youth and their wellness within the community. So I would like to see us very much so look at funding that, and I'm curious to hear from the rest of my council on that.
Well, are they they're normally a person, an entity that applies for a grant, correct? Along with everybody else?
That's correct. This year they put in a $300,000 grant application.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're saying is rather than bypassing the process by which we consider all the grants equally and give them all the appropriate consideration that they're due, that you would like to maybe put some more money back into that after they took 76,000, or actually 66,000 up for the thing. So if it were to do, is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah,
So
I would like
that,
to increase the budget for that general fund program. I know that it's a small portion of all of the stuff that our city's entire budget, but I do think that those are very important organizations that do things kind of outside of the purview of what the city can provide to the community.
And if they were to do that, where would that money come from? Because it's got to come from somewhere.
Hopefully,
Are you talking about doing this as a line item thing or just as part of the general grants every year?
I don't know what would be the best structure for us to do that. I would look at it sort of as a line item thing, but I guess we would have to evaluate that. So I know that there was some concern over some of the programs that was expressed to me from them where the city and the Boys and Girls Club had thought there would sort of be a split allocation related to that, and it wound up being that the majority of the people were signing up through the Boys and Girls Club, not through the city. And I just think that that's a resource that is very much utilized by the youth throughout the city at each of the campuses of our public school campuses within the city, Webster, Point Dume, Juan Cabrillo, and the middle school, high school. And it's something that the city should be supporting.
How much did we give them last year? Do you remember?
We gave them $40,000 last year, and that is pretty comparable, I think, from past years as well.
Didn't we also do something else in addition to that? Wasn't
We
there?
give them library funds.
Yeah.
We helped provide the furniture and a lot of the books and things like that for the wellness center,
And we've done that
that's-
2 years in a row now.
and
given
also
them.
a position. We also fund a position, a librarian for them through our library fund. So we spend around 150, 175,000.
It's a little more than that, but you're correct. And the process was conducted by Laura and I with oversight, and we funded quite a lot into their programs with different levels, whether it was gaming choices, staff positions, and actually furnishing hardware for their properties. So they're receiving a lot from the library as well.
That's actually been something we've been doing for a number of years. And so, Skylar, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I tried to get a line item for the Boys and Girls Club as opposed to a grant, and I obviously wasn't successful on with that. I think I need some more information about the, it's different to give it for their, to the Boys and Girls Club for their budget. I think the after-school programs, that's something that's paid for by the parents, my understanding.
I think that they pay for a small portion of it.
Right.
Is my understanding.
For after-school programs?
Correct. That
No,
not
I'm talking about
everybody.
enrichment programs. I'm
You know
talking
what,
about the
I
classes.
don't know the exact details.
So that I would want, Jesse maybe, or Reva, some more information about I mean, if you sign your kid up to take, you know, a computer class or something after school, that's usually what the parents pay for it. Not every parent can afford it, and I know we do scholarships and stuff. So that I look at a little bit differently than I would supporting some of their core programs, the Smart Girls and all of the other ones, as well as the Wellness Center. I just look at those two a little differently, so I would want to see the budget. But I'm not against, and just for Rick, and I'm sure Jefferson remembers this, I think when Lou and I started, the Boys and Girls Club got very, very little, and we've been able to increase it to 40, I think it was 40,000. Last year it was 10,000, and then it went up to 15, and, you know, and then we got it up, I think, incrementally a little bit every year. So I'm not against that. I just want to look at the difference between some of the enrichment programs and their regular budget.
So I think what would be, if for our next budget hearing, if you can bring something back with increasing the allocation for the general fund grants. I don't know how much, if we had 175 in there or 200 or what the number is.
Or we want to do, or if there is a way to do it as a line item.
But I
we
would
should
like
find out if we can do that. We should
So
check
that
with
they don't have to
Christie about how we
rely,
can do it.
or that they don't have to, I mean, it's always up to the council every year to decide on a budget, but it's a little different knowing something's in a budget as opposed to, oh, what's going to happen with the grants every year. And so.
Correct. And I think it's something that the city should step up and do.
It also seems that this is an expense. The concept of the grant program is that, you know, we're giving some money to the things that the city should be doing and isn't doing. And we're helping people do that. And I don't think there's anything more worthy of that than the Boys and Girls Club.
Can I just make a suggestion that might be helpful for all of us moving forward, is for the council to give us the list of all the items that you'd like to see changed and increased, and we will do what we can to incorporate as much and hopefully all of them. But I'm going to be very cautious this year. We just authorized spending $42 million, and that's going to reflect in some belt tightening for us overall going forward. And unfortunately, it's Lisa's role and my role to continue to remind everybody of that. So with that in mind, we will do whatever we can, but let's get the full list, and then we will come back with whatever we can include.
That sounds very responsible. Okay, that it? Skylar, anything else? Jefferson?
Good, thank you.
Okay, let me address a few things that came over the transom on the email. There were some people who emailed me, and amongst others, and were concerned about the not having enough time to review the budget, and it's a lot of money, and it's too fast, and we're being irresponsible maybe, and it's millions of dollars, and there's a lot of increases and stuff. So let me address that. I would hope that they would have been here, but I'm hoping that they're watching somewhere. A lot of the things that we're talking about this evening, we've talked about before, and some of the bigger items, which is, you know, adding some personnel positions. We've discussed in administration, finance, and they've already actually been in council meetings. I can remember John Mazza, you know, coming to the podium and talking about them. So they're not. Some of this may seem like it's just sprung on people, but it's not. A lot of it's a fairly deliberative process. We do take it quite seriously. I've gone through this whole thing in detail with my red pen, and I look at everything in detail. I look at all the percentage increases, etc. So we take it very seriously, and we're lucky to be able to have people who are disciplined about the way we spend our money. And we're not cavalier about it at all. But the points that they brought up are important points, and people should be able to express themselves to the council and express concerns about fiscal discipline. I think fiscal discipline when it comes to government and transparency is extremely important. You know, we all remember the City of Bell nightmare as an example, and I think for the most part, most cities throughout California are pretty good now about being transparent, and ours is no exception. One of the things that came up was, hey, what the heck? You got too many employees. You know, Westlake only has 22 employees. So let me address that, okay, because that's important. It's true. Westlake Village, which has 8,000 people, only has 22 employees, which is that's fairly impressive. You know, we're not Westlake Village, but that's pretty cool. So they have an average of 300 residents per employee, and Malibu has an average of 81 residents per employee. So let's look at some of the other towns around here. Manhattan Beach has 65 residents per employee. They're even less than us. The surprising ones are like the city of Los Angeles, which has 4 million people, and they got 60,000 employees. And they have a ratio of more employees per resident than we do. So does the county of Los Angeles. The county of Los Angeles is 10 million people in it, 107,000 employees, and they have a ratio of more employees per resident than we do. But let's look at something that's comparable. We got Hermosa Beach. They got about 19,000 residents, a pretty small area. So they don't have 21 miles of coastline that they got to patrol. They don't have canyons. They don't have a lot of stuff that we do. And they have, just like us, 236 employees, but they have more people, and they have about the same ratio of 83 residents per employee. So there's the full range all over here. And, you know, Santa Barbara has 2,100 employees, and they've got a much, they have more employees per resident than we do. So, you know, to just throw one little item out there and say, I want you to know that we listen to that, we consider it, we do our homework, we check out what we're doing, and I would say that we're pretty much in line with other comparable towns, and my hat's off to Westlake Village. I don't know how they're pulling that off, but we are not Westlake Village, and I think it's a great town. I love shopping there, but when things are all, you know, kind of condensed in a smaller area, it's different than when you got the Wild West of 15 million visitors coming to the beach, et cetera, et cetera. And so thank you for your comments. We do take them seriously. I appreciate everybody being concerned about how their money is being spent. You should be concerned. You should be concerned about how your money is being spent, because guess what? It's your money. And it's our responsibility to do a good job with it. And I think that we're doing a pretty good job with it. And let me address a couple things, because we do have money that's coming in, and we spend money. And then we have long-term debt, correct? And the long-term debt is solely for property purchases, for the most part, legacy, park, et cetera, and now potentially with some new ones. But we don't operate in the red with the money that comes in. In other words, we don't operate in a deficit and pile on the debt like the federal government does at all. I want to make that clear for everyone who's listening.
That's absolutely correct. First of all, it's illegal for us to operate and spend more money every year that comes in on our ongoing expenses. That's why Lisa points out several times that we have a balanced budget, and a balanced budget means if we're bringing in $5, we can only spend $5, and we have consistently done that. The exception to that is one-time capital expenses, like a capital improvement project. Our debt service is for properties that we have bought for land acquisition. The only debt that we have associated with something other than land acquisition is the improvements that were made here at City Hall.
Okay, and
that's included in the balanced budget.
Right, and we're haven't finished it, but we're considering doing some significant property acquisition here, which was going to incur some additional long-term debt. And when we considered that, we took our time considering it. And we're very deliberate about it, and it involves a certain amount of risk analysis. And the comments about Santa Rosa are sound. I mean, that could easily happen here, and we've been fairly lucky so far but this is natural disaster central. So we do take all those things into consideration. As Lou says, we're only one natural disaster away from bankruptcy, potentially, if it's bad enough. But we don't take those decisions foolishly, but when an opportunity comes by that's, and the planets align, then it's kind of you can't not take that risk. You just have to be smart about how you do it. And I'm glad that you said that we may be heading into a little belt tightening, because we're all about that. So I just wanted to throw that out there for everybody who expressed any concerns about the budget and that that we might be being wasteful, et cetera. I don't think that's the case, and we're deliberate in our process, and thank you very much for doing a good job with all that. And yes, Skylar, you can say something, and then you're.
So I just wanted to add that it seems like, some of the, I received those emails as well. I appreciate you addressing that, and some of the concerns that are related to that. Some of the cities that were referenced are contract cities. Some of them are not contract cities. Some of them are full-service cities. So there's many different elements that go on. People know that Malibu has a very large amount of area, so there's a lot of things to maintain relative to some of the other areas that were referenced in the employee sizes. The other thing is things like septic systems. Our environmental health department is a little bit maybe more expanded in that retrospect. The other thing is managing, as we well know, the amount of visitors that come here, along with, the public safety challenges that come with that. So that's, why I see, oftentimes, Mayor, how those expenses are a lot, higher or relative to some other cities maybe of a similar size. And I wanted to ask Riva to maybe address some of that stuff as well, if she could, real quick.
Certainly, I'll use Westlake Village since the mayor brought that up, and I love Westlake Village, and I'm not going to say anything other than the fact they do have a smaller number of employees. However, they do have the same workload, and they do operate at a balanced budget as well, but those services are provided through contracts, contract employees, and other types of outside contracts. So just like the city of Malibu provides street maintenance services through contract, they do contracts for planning, and they do contracts for public works and all the different things that we have as staff. So they actually have those expenses. They're just not showing up as an employee expense. Some of the things that cause our expenses to be higher are some of the mandates that we're required to do that other cities aren't doing. So the water quality testing and the mandates from the Los Angeles Regional Water Board, the fact that we're building a $50 million wastewater treatment facility and all the work that goes into that. We have Pacific Coast Highway. And again, we have 15 million visitors, and those cities aren't seeing that type of visitor number. I sit on the COG governing board for the Council of Governments for the Las Virgenes Malibu area, and we're the only city that has homelessness in our COG. They have no homeless issues.
That's why we got the grant.
Right, and we were provided the grant because they don't have a use for it. And so these are things that we're spending. Our public safety numbers, as Lisa showed, are considerably higher than our COG cities because of the visitor numbers and the problems that we have here keeping our residents safe. So, I really appreciate that people spend time looking at the budget and going through it, and I appreciate that people ask questions because I think it's really important. As the mayor said, it is our community's money. This is taxpayer dollars, and I want people to know that it's being spent wisely. So I hope that answered your questions, Councilmember Peak.
Yeah, the other thing that I just wanted to add in that is that, I know that we made an acquisition a couple years ago, and we're looking at making another acquisition now. And even, in light of that, we're still able to structure, a managed budget and maintain a reserve. And I think that that's something that shows how fiscally responsible the city council is and the community. And our staff here, and as well as receiving the comments from those in our community.
And also, after I forgot to mention this, that we currently are presenting 100% reserve. So that means we bring in $30 million, spend $30 million, and we have $30 million in the bank. And even after we make the land acquisition, we'll still maintain a 65% reserve amount. So going back to Lisa's story about Santa Rosa, They had 15% as a goal and only 25% reserve. So even after making this very major land acquisition, we'll still maintain that 65% reserve for a rainy day or a hot, dry day.
I want to echo what Reva said and what Skylar said, but most of all, I want to thank the mayor for bringing all this up in the first place. And I think you addressed it beautifully. The bottom line, as far as I can see, is that, you know, when you talk about a city like Westlake Village, which is a great place, the 15 million people that they see are just going by on the 101. They're not stopping. All of our visitors actually come here. And as far as Santa Barbara is concerned, the city council members in Santa Barbara get $45,000 a year, and the mayor gets 50, which is not happening here. But Zev Yaroslavsky...
Was that another line? Were you referencing another line item?
Well, maybe. Zev Yaroslavsky used to say that we were one disaster away from bankruptcy. And that used to be true, but it's not true anymore. And I think this council has had an awful lot to do with that. And our city manager definitely has a lot to do with it. So thank you all.
Go ahead, Jefferson.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everybody that we have another whack at this at the end of May, and a number of citizen references could be addressed then, and that they could probably do a little bit of education and get deeper into it, because we've got 30 days, and that should be enough time. And I'd like to hear some details at that time too. So thank you, and thank you for everybody that's looking into this.
And you know, did you want to say something more? Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that there are, you know, there's the fund grant, as Lisa's slide showed, and then there's going to be a A&F budget discussion, then another public hearing, and then another public hearing when we actually vote on it and adopt it. So, and I too appreciate you bringing this up, Rick, and it's a process, as in everything important that we do, whether it's something that, you know, that starts at Zeracis and then goes to the Planning Commission and then finally comes here. There's many opportunities for people to look at it. The same with the budget, and I really do agree. I hope people avail themselves of all of those opportunities and study it and bring back to us issues and items that they might have that they're concerned about, or they want to add or delete or whatever. That's how everything works. That's how it works. We hear back from our community.
Yeah, and the thing with the cities come in all shapes and sizes, and I didn't quite realize, you know, I didn't drive this point home until we were discussing the school separation, and there was a graphic with Malibu and Santa Monica. And I think of Malibu as being a little quaint little small town on the coast, and Santa Monica being some, you know, giant urban thing. Malibu is much bigger than Santa Monica, physically. I mean, it's gigantic compared to Santa Monica. So all these different towns have different idiosyncrasies or physical things or challenges, and ours has our unique challenges. So again, I want to say to anybody who has a concern, you have the right to have a concern. We want to hear what your concerns are. We want your input, we want your feedback, and we also want you to know that we're being responsible with your money, and if you don't think we're being responsible, please tell us, and we will answer all your questions. And I want to say thank you, as you began your presentation by thanking all the hard people who did all the hard work, Ruth, Lisa, etc., everybody, you know. It's not easy stuff. So not only for this budget we have in front of us, but for enabling the city to be in a position where we could make this potential great land acquisition, which we would not have been able to do if we weren't as in the black as we were. We weren't in the black like we were supposed to be. We were pretty much double in the black, and that put us in a very strong position. And everyone out there should be thankful for that, because we've been running a tight ship. We were able to potentially do something that will have mega long-term implications for the benefit of the city of Malibu, that's in complete harmony with the vision statement. So thank you very much. And that's the last thing I have to say on this.
Do we have to make a motion on this right now, or nothing? We're just hearing it and moving on.
Do I have a...
We've received your input, and as I said, we will take the list of requests back and do our best to incorporate what you've asked for.
If there are no further comments,
A motion to adjourn?
the meeting is adjourned. I so decree.
All right, good job.